Hi, welcome everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm speaking today on capturing user feedback from anywhere using Salesforce Flow. Give you a little bit about who I am. I'm currently a senior Salesforce developer for the Amherst Group. I also serve as co-leader of the Cleveland Developer Group. I host our local Salesforce Saturdays here in Cleveland, and I'm a facilitator with Girls Who Code. I currently hold 11 certifications and am an 18 times ranger. Yes, I have all the badges except one super badge, at least until they release some new ones. Um, I have my Twitter handle and LinkedIn here, but you'll find those also later in the presentation in case you don't catch them from here and want to connect. So the use case I'm presenting this morning with using Flow is about user feedback. Overall, I want to create a simple way for my users to provide me feedback about the user interfaces they interact with in Salesforce. And I want to make sure that we're reviewing that feedback on a regular basis and considering it when we're making enhancements. So it needs to be easy for the user. I need it to be easy for the admin to set up, and we need to regularly review the reports of that feedback as it was provided. So my basic process is going to be that the admin's going to have this mechanism for adding that user feedback to a Lightning page. The user is going to fill it out, providing a rating and comments. They're going to click submit, and the SF team overall is going to get a weekly report of all that collected feedback. To do this, we're going to need to create a custom object to store that feedback. We're going to have a screen flow that we create and activate that captures the feedback. We're going to add that flow to one or more Lightning pages. We're going to create a report, and we're going to add a report subscription. I'm going to walk through these steps through the slides and then do a demo afterwards, just because I know the nature of the demos don't always cooperate when you're doing them live. So this custom object that we're going to create, I'm going to call it user feedback. Plural of user feedback is user feedback. It starts with a vowel. For the name field, I'm going to use an auto number. It makes it a lot easier. I don't have to expect my users to give it a label of some kind this way. And I'm going to set those checkboxes to allow for reporting and also to launch that custom tab wizard when I create that object. For the custom tab wizard, once it comes up, I'm going to make that tab hidden for all profiles except for system admin, which I'll have it as default on. The reason for this is I don't expect my users to go in and look at this feedback. I'm only expecting myself or anyone with the system admin or part of the Salesforce team to really look at it. I'm going to add 3 custom fields to this object. Feedback item is a text field. I'm going to set this to a length of 50 to start with. Sometimes you may want it a little longer depending on your org and how you need to describe things for users to know what they're providing feedback about. I'm going to have our rating field. It's a number field. I'm going to use a scale of 1 to 5 when I build this, so I only need 1 digit. I don't need any decimals. You could choose to use a 1 to 10 rating scale, in which case you'll need a length of 2 instead. And then comments are my last field. I want this to be a text area long. I'm going to give my users the most characters they could possibly have. I really hope none of them write me novels, but they could. After I've created the object and added the fields, I'm going to arrange that page layout to be useful. So I will probably make sure that that long text field is in a single column section. And that just, I'm seeing everything. I'm going to make sure I can see the created by, so I know which user submitted that record. I'm going to test this a little bit. I'm going to create a record or 2, and then I'm going to delete them when I'm done. I'm going to make sure I give read and create access to that object to either all the profiles who I want to be able to provide feedback, or I'm going to create a feedback provider permission set that's going to have that access. I'm still not going to give them the tab. If I choose I want my users to be able to see just their feedback, I need to make sure that the sharing on this custom object is set to private without being part of the role hierarchy. And then I'd give them that tab, make it default off. Probably they would go to it. They'd only be able to see the records that they create in that case. So then the flow would be the next part I have to build. This is a very simple flow, and it consists of only 2 screens and a create records. Really simple. I'm going to go through the parts of that flow, through the slides, and then we will build out when I get to the demo. So the first piece is an input variable that I need to add. That input variable, I'm going to call it feedback item. It's a text data type. Remember that 50 character field I made on my object? It's going to be equivalent. It's going to help to populate that. I'm going to make it available for input because depending on where I place this flow, I'm going to want to provide what that value is as the admin, not as a user. I'm going to need my first flow screen. I'm just going to call it feedback 1, really simple. I'm going to include a display text that includes that feedback item so that they know what I'm asking about. So in this case, you'll see I have the message, please provide your feedback about the, and that's where that feedback item displays. So together we can make your Salesforce experience better. Really about that message that you give the user really needs to let them know that you're partnering with them, not just that you just want feedback. They need to know you're going to act on it, that you're not just taking feedback for the sake of taking feedback. I'm using a slider for the rating with the 0 through 5. When you choose to add a slider, you choose what the increment is. So the increment in this case is 1, and I'm starting with 1 as the low rather than 0. I'm adding that text for freeform for comments, and I can use whatever label I want for it. So in this case, I use kind, please expand on your rating or provide any additional feedback. This presents as a fully customizable experience. So if you don't want to use a rating, you don't have to. It could just be the comments. You could instead do a simple, 1, 2, thumbs up, thumbs down type rating. You can get as fancy or as simple as you like. The create records is obviously the next step of, let me actually hide that. That'll make it easier to see this screen. The create records is the next step of building out the flow. So the label, I just use create user feedback. How many records? We're only creating 1. We're going to use separate resources, literal values, so we can assign each of the fields that we collected. The object is that user feedback custom object we created, and the 3 custom fields we created are the ones we're going to map. When we map the rating, because I used a slider in this case, I have to choose that element from my screen flow, and then within it, I need to choose the value. For the feedback item and the comments, the feedback item was that input variable that's going to be filled in by the admin when they choose to put this on a page. And then the comments is also from the screen. Then the last screen that I wanted to present to my users is just a quick thank you. So it's just display text. I called the screen itself just feedback 2. And then when I'm done, I want to save and activate. I want to make sure I've tested the flow. I want to test it both as myself, and then I want to test it as a user to make sure they have the correct rights for running and using the flow. If they don't, I need to make sure they have it, that they have the ability to read and create on the fields as well as the object for user feedback, that they have run flow either in their user profile, right, in their user record, or use flows in their profile or a permission set. Then I need to think about adding this to the pages so it's actually useful. You need to plan ahead for this. Where do you really want to get feedback from your users? Have you made changes to the UI recently that would be a great place to get some user feedback? Have you heard rumblings about a page that users find confusing or hard to use? Another great place to put it. Continue to ask feedback. You don't want to leave this up indefinitely. You're not going to get as much response over time. So how often and who will be included when you review the feedback? So who's going to be part of that team that's deciding what things you work on, what things when you get that feedback really need to be changes to the system. Don't overwhelm your users with feedback requests. Keep it to only a few places at a time and periodically move them. Make sure you're prepared to honestly review and consider that feedback. Feedback from users is precious. Treat it as such. Use it. React to it. and help them when it's really just a training issue. Determine what you're going to call the space when you're asking for feedback, and then it will make putting it just on a page to say, and it's for the account page. But if you're putting in a specific tab within the page, you might want to mention what the label is for that tab. So you're looking for feedback about this specific tab, things like that. Or if you want to even get more granular and say, hey, I want feedback about this specific part of the page, make sure it's a label that the users will know what you're talking about. So when I go to add this, I actually go to a record, I edit the record page, and I'm going to just drag the standard flow component, this is not a custom component, and place it on the page. Within the setup for that component, I'm going to choose my flow. In this case, I had called it feedback. Sometimes I call it user feedback when I create it. It's a one column, so I don't have to change that. And then the feedback item, my input variable, is what I need to populate with what I want to call it. So in this case, this example that's on the screen, sorry, I called the field slightly different, feedback item placement, but it's the account page where I was putting this one. So when you're done, save it, test it, make sure you test it as a user so you're sure that your users can see it and contribute to it. If you create any test records, make sure you remove them so they're not part of your report. And setting up that report would be the next step once it's available. You want to use the report type of the user feedback object. That report type automatically gets created. You want to group by the rows by that feedback item. You want to include the rating and the comments. Depending on what you're doing, you may or may not want to include who made that comment, so the created by, but you probably want when, so the created date. You want to change the summarization on that rating field to be an average. Doesn't make much sense to add it. Doesn't make much sense to just count it unless you just want to count to see how many records. But overall, that rating probably should be an average. You might want to remove the subtotals. That's kind of up to you. If you want the rating for each object, you probably want to leave it. You want to filter. So you want to add filters because you're going to have this report sent out. Definitely want all records, but you probably want to limit the created date. Depending on how often you're going to have this report to you, last 7 days, last 14 days, depends on how frequently you're going to want that report. And then you're going to need to save the report, obviously, and add that subscription for weekly or whatever time frame and who you want it sent to. Make sure you save this report in a folder that all the users you're sending it to have access to, or you won't be able to add them to the subscription. So when you're done, you need to finish up. You need to communicate to your users about the new feedback mechanism. You need to reiterate to them that you're serious about partnering to improve their Salesforce experience. Encourage them to provide you that feedback and follow through on that feedback. I'm going to, at this point, jump and do a demo. So hands-on, take you through these steps of building this out. Hopefully the demo works just. So I'm in setup. I'm actually in a Trailhead org, but if this were your real org, I'd encourage you to build it out in a sandbox first, fully test it. Then you can deploy out flows and all the other pieces that are a part of this. So the first thing I need to do is set up that custom object. So I create my custom object. I'm going to call it user feedback. And that's also the plural. And we're starting with a U, so that's a vowel. Descriptions are always good. So object to store. I'm going to want to instead use an auto number for my label. So I tend to, when I do that, instead of calling it name, relabel it to number. And I'm just going to use the letters of my object, starting at 0. And as I mentioned before, I want to allow reports. And then I want to, where's the tab? The launch new tab wizard there. I don't need notes and attachments. I could if I was going to use it. This is a mechanism to kind of track whether I've made improvements or how I solved. I could do that as well, but I'm not going to do that today. And I just say save, and it'll take me to the tab. So I'm going to choose my tab style. And I'm going to choose the bell. Just choose one really quick. Could add a description, which could be helpful. I'm going to skip over that at the moment. And like I mentioned, I want to set it to tab hidden for all users. They don't really need to go into this object, but then what I'm going to do is apply a different tab for my system administrator so that it's default on. That way the system admin team can get to it and see it, check that records are actually existing, especially if they end up not getting that report for a while. I'm not going to include it in any of my apps. I'm just going to have it exist as a tab, and I save it. It's going to take me into the object. It's off. Here it is. I need to add those 3 fields. So the first of those is a rating. It is a number field. Go. I'm just calling it rating. That is both my label and my API name. Since I'm only using a 1 through 5, I only need 1 digit. If you're going to go through 10, use 2. It really depends on what kind of scale you want. Adding a description, adding a help text if you want. Since I'm going to use this in a flow, I'm really not going to use the help text. I'm going to take care of that in my flow. I'm going to leave it so it's visible for all users. And I want it in my layout. My next field is that feedback item. So this is going to be a text field. And just label it feedback item. I'm going to give it a length of 50. If you tend to label things a little bit longer, you may want a label of 100. Just remember, most objects and things with the names of things in Salesforce are usually limited to an 80 character length. So I probably wouldn't really want to go above 100 ever. I'm going to give this a quick description just so that I know what this is for. And it's the label for the item for which feedback is being collected. I could require it to save a value. I don't have to. It might be safer to do that just in case someone forgets, but we're going to skip that for now. Again, same visibility in the page layout. And then I'm going to create my last field. My last field is going to be a long text area, which, yeah, I had 32,000. Looks like the character limit has gone up since I originally created this. This is the default. You can increase it if you want. I'm going to leave it at that. 3 lines visible is fine for me. Comments, if I wanted to use a description, that's good. And I would not worry about a default value in this case. Again, same visibility, including in the page layout. And that adds the 3 fields. I'm then going to check my page layout, make sure it's useful for me to use it or for the team to be able to review records. So I've got what the feedback item is. I have my comments. I have my rating, but my comments right now are in a single column, and I know that this could get really long. So I'm just going to add a section. I'm going to make it a 1 column. I'm just going to call it comment, so it's got a label, and I'm going to pull that comment field down to it. Sorry, this screen is kind of small, but there, it's now there, and I can save it. It'll make a little more sense when I see it. And I'm going to really quickly test to make sure everything's there. So coming to the user piece, I'm going to look for that new tab, and it shows up. Click on it, takes me Okay. You know, Salesforce being Salesforce. But it takes me to my object. Obviously, I have no recent records. I probably might want to create my all view if it has not already done that for me. Might want to edit what fields show in here just so that I could see that. So in my list view control, the fields, and maybe I want to see a feedback item and create a date. Probably wouldn't put the comment right in here, but maybe the rating would be worthwhile. Just so that I have some fields and more than just the auto number. So just testing this, you know, someone could give it a 4, could be homepage, and the comments just could be, this is great. So I can see that I was able to create a record, it's there, and since I'm admin, I can actually delete that record so it doesn't stick. So, you know, that's working. I should, you know, log in as a different user, but I'm in a playground, so I don't have many user accounts right now. So the next piece is to set up my flow. So I'm going to go back to setup. I'm going to go back to the home part of setup and go to flow. Creating a new flow. And this is going to be a screen flow. Auto layout is on automatically now, so that's a little new for me, but that's okay. I'm going to have to click this little toggle toolbox so I can add that resource that we talked about, that input variable. So it's just my feedback item. Give it a description. Admin can set this for all user records created based on flow placement. The data type for this is text. And I want to allow it for input so that it'll show up as a field that the admin can designate the value for when they place it in the page layout. So I've got my resource. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my screen flow. So I'm just going to add my screen. I'm going to give it a label right now, feedback 1. And then I'm going to add display text. I'm just going to give it a quick label. Of some kind. I'm going to say in my message, please provide your feedback about the, and that's where I'm going to insert that input variable. So this feedback item. To make your Salesforce experience better. I like to highlight things, make things clearer, make them bigger. 12-point font doesn't always attract attention. So I'm going to make it 14. I'm going to bold it and give it a color. Probably not the best color, but that's okay. I'm then going to add, as I mentioned, a slide for that rating field. So I'm just going to click the slider. I'm going to call it rating. I'm going to set my text that's going to tell the user what I'm looking for. I'm going to specify the idea that 1 is low and 5 is high for them. So my range max is going to be 5. My range minimum is going to be 1. My step size is going to be 1. So this is kind of the default value. So I want to set, I think this is default. Yeah. So I'm going to have the user start it at 5. So they're starting at high and then they'll be able to change it. and it's always on. I'm not going to hide it. Then the last piece I'm going to add is a text box. Please provide any additional comments or feedback. And I'm just going to, my API name for it is just going to be comments. I can choose whether I want to require this or not, meaning that they have to type comments, or can they just provide a rating? If all I'm going to include is not the rating and just comments, I probably would want to require it. Otherwise, they're not really providing anything. I'm not going to worry about that right now for this demo. And then that really pretty much finishes up the page. So I'm just going to say done. So I've got my screen. My next thing to add is to actually create my record. So I need to come here to my create records. I'm going to give it a label that matches my API name. I should give it a description. I'm going to create one record, and I'm going to use separate resources and literal values. For my object, it's that user feedback object that I created, so I just have to find it. And then I have to add my fields. So as I mentioned, rating is that first one. From here, I'm taking it from the slider. And then I have to choose the value is the one that is the stored item that they select. I want to include that feedback item so that I know what I'm collecting feedback about. And I'm just going to use what that input variable was. And then last, my comments, for the comments field that's out there. And from the screen flow, the screen component, I want to choose the comments. I don't need to manually assign variables afterwards. That's all I really need to do here. So I'm just going to say done. And I want to add this with a final screen to say thank you. So somehow, yeah. So I'm just going to label this one feedback 2. And I'm just using display text for this. Give it a label. And then my message. This one's probably a little lengthy, but that's okay. And then again, playing with my fonts, you know, it's up to you what you want to do. I'm going to try to come as close as I could to the other color I chose. Without, again, not necessarily the best color, but that's okay. I'm done. Save my work. I'm going to give this a label. I'm actually just going to call it feedback flow. In my description, I might put some comment so the admin will know when they put it on a page that they need to include the feedback item. And I can't type today. And save. So as a good practice, I should always debug my flow to make sure it works. So I'm going to come in here. I could run it as myself. I could run it as a user who has access. I should probably do both. But I'm just going to run it as myself for my feedback item. Right now, I'm going to pretend I put it on the account page, and I'm going to run it. And I'm going to see, please provide your feedback about the account page so we can work together to make your Salesforce experience better. I've got this rating, so maybe I want to say it's a 4, and then comments. Wish it went to detail tab first. Maybe that's the comment. Say next, and I can see over here that it created that record, and then I got my thank you message as I expected. So now we know the flow's there, and it works. I've not yet activated it though, so I'm going to go back and activate it. So the next step is actually putting it in a page. So I come back here to my org, and I'm going to put it in an account. So I have to actually physically go to an account page, and then I can edit the page layout. So to add it to the page, I just need to go and find the flow component here, and I drag it to where I want it on the page. I'm going to use it for the page overall, so I'm going to just kind of drag it actually above this tab so it's a little more prominent. If I want it a little less prominent, I'd probably put it lower. I have to choose my flow, which is my feedback flow. And then I want to put in my feedback item. And in this case, we're going to call this the account page. I'm not passing the record ID. You may find that you want that, in which case you'll need a field to store it in, and you'll have to modify your flow to actually be able to write it into the record, just in case the user makes comments about a specific record. You'll know which record that was for, so you can investigate. And I'm going to save this, and I'm going to have to activate it since I have not done so in this org, and I'm just going to make it the default, the org default in this case, for both form factors. So that's done. Click save one last time. Go back to the page to make sure it's there. And I can clearly see it. I know I can use it. I would at this point then test it, not just as myself, but also as a user. I'm going to skip that in the interest of time because we only have 6 minutes left, and I need to create a report. So my report, really quick, I'm going to create a new report. My report type is the user feedback object, so I just choose user feedback and start my report. I want to make sure that I have that rating field, that I have the feedback item, and I have the comments. I could include other things if I want to, such as the created by, so I know who the user is who made that comment, as well as when, but I'm just going to limit us to that. I'm going to drag the feedback item up to the group so that I'm grouping by that feedback item. And I'm going to do my filters. So obviously I want all feedback. And for created date, I'm going to use the last 7 days. So last 7 days. So I'm only getting a week, and I'm going to subscribe so it's sent frequently enough to see all that data. I'm going to turn on the preview really quick so I can see that, hey, there's my data from that one record. I probably don't need to see this, but having that link might be useful. I think what I'm going to do though is move that, reorder what's in the timeline so it's like at the end maybe, or just bring the other two up, depending on how cooperative my mouse wants to be today, so that that's at the end. It's the last piece. I'm going to save my report, new user feedback report, awesome name. Give it a description. So new feedback record is from the last 7 days, so I know what it's about. I'm going to put it in a folder that's accessible to the users who need to be able to see it. In this case, I don't have that set up yet, so I'm just going to save it here. So it's been saved, and I'm going to run it. So I have my report with my run record in it. I can then add my subscription. So weekly, I'm going to run this every Sunday, maybe every Sunday and every Wednesday. So I get it twice a week with 7 days, just in case I miss record. 9 a.m. is a great time. I'm sending it in this case to myself, but I'm going to run it as myself, and I'm going to, in this case, I really can't add other recipients because I'm in a private folder, but if I could, I would be adding it to the rest of my team. I might want to add conditions. The condition I would add would be that record count is greater than 0, so that if there are no results, I don't get the report. I save my subscription. And that ends the demo. So back to the slides. So some other alternatives for feedback. Obviously, you could set up a chatter group and use the tags, or have your users use the tagged feedback. Creating a report off of that is also possible. Having office hours or drop-in style meetings are a great way to get feedback from users and to encourage them to share or screen during it so you can see what they're talking about. Having a specific email set up for feedback, possibly even using email to case so it creates cases. And just remember that this flow can go on any Lightning page. It can go on the record, it can go on the home page. If you set the correct permissioning up, you can even include it in a community. So I do have a personal website where I have a 4-page step-by-step instruction sheet for how to build this. So there is the link. There's a QR code that takes you to the link if you find that easier to use. And I'm trying to think where else I can put this. I can probably share it in some groups, and I will also have it out in my Twitter account, a link to this as well, so in case anyone's interested. So if you have any questions beyond this, you're trying to build it, you get stuck, feel free to message me in Twitter, LinkedIn, email, or through the Trailhead community. I try to respond as quickly as I'm able to. Sometimes it gets to be a little more than a day, but usually not much. Now I'm going to end this and open up for any questions for the last couple minutes. Do I get a lot of feedback with this method? So it varies. I feel like when we've put it out there and let the user, when we've created brand new page layouts, at least at my last company, we got quite a bit of feedback right off, especially when they find something they don't like. I have users who will fill out the feedback every time they go to a page. So I have to remind them they don't have to. But so it varies. Sometimes it's well received, sometimes it's not. Yeah, for tracking timeouts or site issues, if you can, yeah, that might be good too. And like I said, even for if issues regarding specific records, if you actually capture that record ID within your object, that would be good too. And here's that link so that you can find the document if you want to use it. The step-by-step is out there. It does have all the different presentations I've done lately, but it's alphabetical, so it should be one of the first ones because it starts to capture user feedback. So thanks everybody for joining. And thank you to Mark and Vicki for putting together a very great virtual conference for everyone.
Great. Well, thanks again, Lynda, and really great session. We'll stop the recording here, and we've got our next session starting in 5 minutes. So feel free to hop over to our next sessions which you can find in the agenda.